The room was already busy when she arrived, filled with soft noise that never really stopped. People moved in and out, talking, laughing, checking their phones, living inside their own small worlds. In one corner stood an old piano. It wasn't there to impress anyone. It was simply part of the place, like a table or a chair, something most people passed without a second glance. The piano had a few marks on it, signs of age and use, but it still worked. Now and then, someone would press a few keys just for fun, playing random notes before walking away. She noticed the piano as soon as she entered. Her steps slowed, not because she planned to stop, but because the sight of it pulled at something deep inside her. Music had always lived quietly within her, even when life gave her no space to show it. She stood there for a moment, holding her bag close, watching people pass. No one paid attention to her. She looked like any other person, ordinary and easy to ignore. She had not planned to play. That thought felt too bold, too risky. Playing in front of people meant being seen, and being seen meant being judged. She had learned long ago to avoid that. So she stayed where she was, just watching, listening to the room breathe around her. A group nearby laughed loudly. Someone tapped a rhythm on a table. Another person complained about the noise, even while adding to it. Life continued without care. The piano sat quietly, waiting, as it always did. She moved closer without fully realizing it. Each step felt small, almost accidental. She told herself she just wanted a better look. She had always loved pianos, even when she couldn't touch one for months or years at a time. Growing up, chances were rare. Lessons were a luxury. Practice time was something she borrowed when no one was watching. Still, music stayed with her, patient and loyal. She stopped a few feet away from the piano. The bench was empty. The keys looked worn, especially in the middle where most hands seemed to land. She imagined how they would feel under her fingers. That thought alone made her chest tighten. Before she could step back, a voice spoke from behind her. "Do you play?" The question was casual, almost careless. It wasn't meant to change anything. She turned slowly and saw someone smiling, clearly bored and looking for small entertainment. Others nearby glanced over, not with interest, but with mild curiosity. She hesitated. Saying no would be easy, safer. Saying yes would open a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. "A little," she said finally, her voice low. The person shrugged. "Go on then. Play something simple." The words were said lightly, like a joke. Simple. As if music were only a trick to pass the time. As if what lived inside her could be reduced to a few easy notes. A few people laughed softly. No one expected much. That made it worse and better at the same time. Worse because it reminded her how small she seemed to them. Better because no one would be disappointed if she failed. She looked at the bench. Her heart beat faster. Her hands felt cold. Every excuse rushed into her mind at once. She could say she was busy. She could say she didn't feel well. She could simply walk away. But something held her there. Maybe it was the way the piano waited, silent and patient. Maybe it was the years of quiet practice that had never been witnessed. Or maybe it was just the tired feeling of always holding herself back. Slowly, she placed her bag down. The sound of it touching the floor felt louder than it should have. The room didn't stop. People still talked. Someone nearby sighed, clearly not expecting anything worth hearing. She sat on the bench. It was slightly unsteady. She adjusted herself, careful not to draw attention. Her fingers hovered above the keys without touching them. For a brief moment, doubt washed over her again. She felt too visible now, too exposed. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she placed her fingers down and played the first note. It was soft, almost shy, exactly what had been asked of her. A simple tune, the kind a beginner might play, the kind no one would clap for. She continued, keeping it plain. The notes followed each other slowly, without rush. A few people glanced over and then looked away, their expectations already met. This was nothing special, just as they assumed. But as she played, something inside her began to settle. The noise around her faded into the background. The room felt farther away. The piano became familiar again, like an old friend. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. The simple tune flowed from memory, steady and calm. One person nearby paused mid-sentence. Another leaned slightly closer without realizing it. There was something gentle in the way she played, something honest. Even though the tune was basic, it carried a quiet warmth. She stayed within the limits she had been given. No showing off. No risk. Just simple notes, clean and clear. Yet each note came from somewhere deeper than expected. She remembered playing alone late at night, keeping the sound low so no one would complain. She remembered broken keys and cold rooms and moments when music was the only thing that made sense. All of that lived in her hands now, even if the tune itself was small. A few people stopped moving. Someone who had been scrolling on a phone looked up. The laughter nearby softened. The room didn't go silent, but it changed. The air felt different, lighter, more focused. She didn't notice any of this. She was still playing, still careful, still holding back. This was only the beginning, after all. Just the simple tune she had been asked to play. When she reached the end of the melody, she let the final note fade naturally. She didn't rush. She didn't add anything extra. For a moment, nothing happened. No clapping. No comments. That was fine. She had expected nothing more. She lifted her hands slowly from the keys and opened her eyes, ready to stand up and step back into the background where she felt safest. But before she could move, she sensed something shift behind her. The room felt quieter now. Not silent, but waiting. Someone cleared their throat. Another person whispered, "Play a bit more." She froze. She hadn't planned for that. Her heart began to race again. Faster this time. The simple tune was over. What came next was uncertain. She looked down at the keys, feeling the familiar pull and the familiar fear. She had done what was asked of her. She could stop now and no one would question it. But the piano was still there. And so was the music, waiting just beneath the surface. She took a slow breath, her fingers resting lightly on the keys once more, standing at the quiet edge of a moment that was about to change everything. Her fingers hovered over the keys, uncertain and trembling slightly. She had only meant to play a simple tune, and she had done that. But now, with the quiet urging from the crowd, a new feeling crept in. A strange mixture of fear and excitement. She had practiced alone for years, feeling the music in private. Now it was alive outside herself, waiting to be shaped in real time. Her pulse quickened, and her mind filled with the question, could she do more? She started slowly, returning to the familiar melody she had just played. Each note was careful and precise. She let her fingers find the comfort of the pattern she knew so well. But as she continued, her attention shifted. She listened not only to the melody but to the echoes around the room. She noticed how the sound traveled, how the subtle differences in tone could draw people in. She realized that the simple tune could be a doorway to something larger if she allowed herself to step through it. Her fingers began to explore slightly beyond the basic notes. Small embellishments appeared, tiny flourishes that made the melody feel warmer, fuller. It was almost imperceptible at first, but she could feel it in the room. Heads lifted, eyes focused. People stopped talking or moving, caught by something they could not fully explain. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It carried a quiet emotion that reached into the hearts of those listening. She felt the shift inside herself as well. What had started as a simple act, a performance meant to meet a casual request, was becoming something more. Her nervousness transformed into a quiet determination. She no longer worried about judgment. Instead, she focused entirely on the sound beneath her fingers. She let her memories, her experiences, and her secret hours of practice shape every note. Every press of a key became a connection not just with the instrument but with the people who were listening. The room, once noisy, became attentive. Conversations had stopped. Only the faint hum of the space remained, punctuated by the resonance of the piano. A few people leaned forward, almost involuntarily, drawn in by the subtle changes in the music. Each note seemed to carry more weight than the last. The simple tune was no longer just a tune. It had depth, a feeling that was difficult to describe but impossible to ignore. She experimented gently, allowing the melody to stretch and breathe. She added pauses, letting the silence speak as much as the notes themselves. The pauses created tension, and the audience felt it, leaning in as if the next note might reveal a secret. She realized that the music could tell a story, and she was beginning to discover that story in real time. A small smile touched her lips. She had never played like this for anyone before. Most of her practice had been quiet and hidden, safe from outside eyes. But now, she sensed the power in the room, a shared energy that was almost tangible. She could feel the anticipation, the curiosity, and the wonder, even if no one spoke a word. The melody continued to grow. She experimented with dynamics, pressing harder on some keys and lighter on others, creating waves of sound that seemed to rise and fall like gentle tides. The audience reacted instinctively. A few people shifted in their seats, others leaned on nearby tables, and a few held their breath, unsure why the music affected them so deeply. She did not need to see their faces to know they were listening. The sound itself told her. For a moment, she thought about stopping. Playing too much in front of people had always frightened her. She was not used to this kind of attention, but something inside urged her forward. She realized that this moment was rare and fragile. It might never come again, and if she let fear guide her now, she would lose something she could not replace. So she continued, letting the music flow naturally, free from hesitation. With each measure, the melody became more confident. The notes felt alive, almost as if the piano itself was joining her in the performance. She did not rush, nor did she force the sound. She allowed it to come gently, shaping it with care and feeling. The result was astonishing even to her. The simple tune had transformed into something beautiful, something unexpected, even though she had never planned it. People began to whisper quietly, their voices filled with awe. No one dared interrupt the flow. They sensed something unique was happening, something that could not be easily explained. The music had taken control of the room. She was no longer a background figure. She was the center of attention, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As she continued, memories of her past played softly in her mind. Long nights alone at home, practicing when no one else could hear. Times of doubt when she wondered if she would ever be able to show anyone what she could do. She thought of the small victories, the tiny improvements that had meant the world to her. All of that experience now flowed through her fingers, giving the music a depth she had never known before. Her hands moved with precision and grace. She discovered subtle variations in the melody that made it more expressive. She adjusted the tempo slightly, sometimes slowing to emphasize emotion, sometimes quickening to convey excitement. Every change was instinctive, coming from the way she felt rather than any plan. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning in closer, smiling, eyes wide with surprise. Some people were visibly emotional, though they tried to hide it. A few shifted uncomfortably, unsure why they were so affected by such a simple tune. She felt no judgment, only the connection the music had created. For a brief period, everyone in the room existed in the same world, united by sound, feeling, and unspoken understanding. Her confidence grew. The fear that had weighed on her at the beginning melted away, replaced by a quiet joy. She could feel the energy of the room feeding back into her performance, lifting the music higher, allowing it to become more powerful without losing its subtlety. She began to add gentle variations that highlighted the emotion hidden in the melody, turning each note into something meaningful. She noticed how the audience was reacting, even though she tried not to. Heads turned, eyes followed her hands, and the energy shifted with each change in the music. The room was no longer just a space. It had become a living entity, responding to every touch, every sound. She had never experienced anything like it, and the realization thrilled her. The simple tune she had been asked to play was now a bridge between herself and the audience. Every person in the room was connected to her and to each other through the shared experience. The notes carried memories, emotions, and stories, even if no one could name them. She realized that music had the power to reach people in ways words never could. She played on, letting the music speak freely. She no longer thought about how it might sound to others. She played for the feeling, for the room, for the moment. The music carried a sincerity that touched everyone listening. The crowd felt it instinctively, and their attention remained fixed, silent yet fully present. By the time she reached the end of the expanded tune, the room seemed changed. The simple melody had grown into something rich, expressive, and alive. People looked at each other in surprise, unsure how to respond but knowing they had witnessed something rare. Even she was stunned by what had emerged from her hands. She sat there for a moment, letting the final note linger in the air. The room was silent except for the fading vibrations, and she could feel the shared emotion, the wonder, the astonishment that her music had created. This was beyond anything she had imagined when she first agreed to play a simple tune. It was a turning point. Something inside her had shifted, and something inside the audience had shifted too. They had come expecting nothing and received something extraordinary, even if they could not yet fully articulate it. And she had discovered that she could reach beyond her own limits, touching hearts in ways she had only dreamed of. When she finally lifted her hands, the silence hung for a moment longer, heavy and filled with meaning. She realized that the room would not be the same after this. Neither would she. The simple tune had become a key opening doors she did not even know existed. And she understood that the music she carried had the power to astonish, inspire, and connect in ways she had never dared to imagine before. As she paused for a moment, letting the final note hang in the air, she felt a strange calm sweep over her. The audience had been quiet, their faces showing curiosity and wonder, but now there was something deeper. A tension in the room, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. She had never performed like this before, in front of anyone who mattered, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. Her hands lingered over the keys, restless and ready. She remembered the first time she had ever really felt music in her chest, as a child playing on a small, worn piano at home. No one had been watching, and yet the room had felt alive. She thought of the hours she had spent alone, perfecting each note, each movement. Now that private world had collided with this public one, and she was beginning to understand that music had power beyond her imagination. She started again, but this time with a subtle shift. The tune was still simple in structure, but she allowed herself to add small variations, embellishments that reflected her own feelings. Each note was measured, deliberate, and yet alive with spontaneity. The people watching began to lean forward, drawn by the unexpected depth of the sound. Conversations had stopped entirely. Even those who had not intended to listen were now completely captivated. As the music unfolded, she felt a quiet surge of confidence. Her nervousness, which had weighed heavily just moments ago, began to melt away. She realized she could trust the music, that it could carry her beyond fear. Her fingers moved over the keys almost instinctively, finding patterns and harmonies that surprised even her. The simple tune she had started with was no longer the same. It had become a vessel for her emotions, for all the moments of struggle and perseverance she had kept hidden. She noticed the small details around her. A few people had stopped mid-step, frozen in place, their eyes wide with awe. One person had their hand over their mouth, barely breathing. Others exchanged quiet glances, sharing a silent acknowledgement that they were witnessing something rare. She did not stop to consider how they felt. She only allowed the music to flow, and in doing so, she could sense the connection it was creating. The melody began to evolve. She experimented with dynamics, playing some notes softly and letting others rise, full of strength and resonance. The piano responded to her touch, the aged keys singing with a clarity that seemed almost miraculous. She was no longer simply playing a tune. She was telling a story, one that needed no words. Each rise and fall, each pause, carried meaning. She could feel the emotions spreading through the room, reaching into hearts and stirring feelings that had no name. Her mind wandered for a brief moment, reflecting on the people who had doubted her over the years. The teachers who had said she lacked talent, the friends who had ignored her passion, the quiet discouragements that had piled up like bricks around her confidence. Yet here she was, defying all of that, allowing herself to be vulnerable and seen. The music became a form of liberation, a way to let go of the weight she had carried for so long. She added more complexity to the tune, still careful not to overwhelm it, but enough to show the skill that had been nurtured in silence. The room seemed to lean in even closer. The audience was now completely engaged. No movement or conversation to distract them. Each note she played seemed to echo in the minds of the listeners, stirring memories and emotions they had not anticipated. It was as if the piano had become a bridge, connecting the private world of her practice with the shared world of those who had paused to listen. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. She was fully immersed, unaware of the outside world, aware only of the sound, the feel of the keys, and the subtle reactions of the people around her. A small smile appeared on her face, unintentional, a reflection of the joy she felt in that moment. The music was alive, and so was she. It was more than she had hoped for when she agreed to play a simple tune. Somewhere in the back, a few people whispered to one another, their words barely audible over the music. They did not question her skill. They marveled at it. They could see the emotion, the years of unseen practice, the care she took in shaping every note. The atmosphere was charged with admiration and astonishment. Though no one spoke too loudly, afraid of breaking the spell, she continued, allowing herself to explore the full range of expression the piano could offer. Soft, gentle passages were followed by bold, dramatic notes. She played with rhythm and timing, creating tension and release, keeping the audience on edge in the most beautiful way. She felt herself growing in confidence with each measure, realizing that she could trust her instincts, that the music could guide her rather than the other way around. At one point, she glanced briefly at the crowd. Their faces reflected what she had been feeling inside. Eyes wide, some glistening with unshed tears, others with mouths slightly open in wonder. She realized she was not alone in this experience. The music had reached them, touched them in ways she could only guess. It was a connection deeper than words, something that existed purely in feeling. She allowed the melody to slow for a moment, softening the notes to a delicate whisper. The room seemed to lean in even further, held in suspension by the quiet intensity of the music. Every pause, every subtle shift in tone, created anticipation, and the audience responded instinctively. She had never played like this for anyone, yet the response was immediate, unspoken, and profound. Then she let the music rise again, gradually building to a gentle climax. She did not rush it. The flow was natural, each note a step in the unfolding journey. The sound filled the room, wrapping around the listeners, making them feel both comforted and exhilarated. She felt a rush of exhilaration herself, an adrenaline that came from giving fully, from being vulnerable and completely present. The audience could not help but be drawn in. People who had arrived indifferent were now captivated. The few who had passed by without notice had stopped, their curiosity transformed into admiration. It was more than talent. It was sincerity, a feeling that could not be faked or taught. Each note carried her story, her struggles, and her perseverance, even if no one knew the details. She noticed small gestures from the listeners. Heads nodded ever so slightly, a subtle sway in rhythm with the music, a hand resting over a heart. Some had eyes closed, as if trying to absorb every sound. She realized that the music was more than entertainment. It had become a shared experience, a moment suspended outside of time where everyone felt connected. Her confidence soared as she explored the upper and lower registers of the piano. The higher notes rang clear and bright, while the lower ones resonated with a warmth that filled the room. She experimented with chords, harmonies, and subtle variations, always careful to maintain the emotional thread that had started with the simple tune. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before, each note reinforcing the connection between herself, the piano, and the audience. The music became almost conversational. She allowed pauses to let the audience reflect, small hesitations to create anticipation, and gentle surges to convey emotion. She felt in control yet free, a rare balance that made every moment feel thrilling and unpredictable. The people listening seemed to understand this instinctively, responding to the ebb and flow of the sound without realizing it. By the end of the performance, the room felt transformed. The simple tune she had begun with had grown into something expressive, moving, and deeply human. The audience sat in stunned silence, absorbing what they had just experienced. They had expected nothing more than a basic melody and had received something far beyond imagination. She lifted her hands from the keys, feeling a strange mix of relief, pride, and awe. She had crossed a boundary she had never dared to approach before. The music had given her courage and had given the audience a glimpse of something rare and beautiful. In that moment, both she and those who had listened knew that something extraordinary had just happened, and it would stay with them long after the final note faded. She could feel the energy in the room shift as she prepared to continue. The audience, previously quiet with curiosity, now seemed fully present, almost tense, as if waiting for the music to reach a moment they could not yet imagine. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, feeling the smoothness beneath her fingers and the subtle resistance of the worn edges. She took a deep breath, sensing the weight of the moment, yet also a strange calm, knowing that the music could carry her forward. She began again, this time with more confidence. The melody she had started with was still there, recognizable, but she allowed it to expand naturally. Her fingers moved with a fluidity born of years of practice, finding subtle variations and harmonies that transformed the simple tune into something richer, more expressive. Each note seemed to float in the air, holding a presence that made the room almost reverent. The audience leaned closer, drawn in by the growing intensity. Some faces showed awe, others disbelief, as if they could not quite comprehend what they were hearing. She could feel the shift in energy, the collective attention focused solely on her and the piano. It was a delicate balance, fragile and beautiful, a connection between performer and listener that seemed almost sacred. Her music began to tell a story. She had never planned it, but it emerged naturally, carrying emotion and depth. The notes spoke of struggle and perseverance, of quiet moments of practice and the long hours of dedication that had brought her here. She had never played this way for anyone before, yet it felt as if the piano and she were in perfect harmony, each note a conversation, each pause a moment of reflection. The room was silent except for the sound of the piano. Conversations had vanished completely, and the usual background noise of movement and shuffling had disappeared. People were absorbed, caught in a moment they could not have predicted. Some had their eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others watched her hands, mesmerized by the speed, precision, and emotion of every movement. She allowed the melody to grow bolder, exploring higher notes and deeper tones, letting the piano resonate fully. Each chord, each transition, was deliberate yet natural, creating a sense of journey and exploration. She could feel the subtle reactions of the listeners, their shared anticipation, their surprise at how a simple tune could evolve into something so powerful. It was as if the music had taken on a life of its own, guiding her and the audience simultaneously. Her fingers danced across the keys with a confidence that had not existed at the beginning. She added variations and flourishes, each one enhancing the melody without overwhelming it. The audience could sense the emotion behind every note, the honesty and vulnerability that she had poured into her playing. She felt connected to them in a way she had never experienced before, the music bridging the gap between her private world and their collective presence. A few people whispered softly to one another, their words tinged with astonishment. They could not believe the transformation that had taken place. What had begun as a simple tune had grown into a complex, moving performance that touched them deeply. They realized that they were witnessing not just skill, but passion, dedication, and the quiet strength of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. She felt a surge of emotion herself, a mixture of pride, relief, and exhilaration. The music had become a channel, allowing her to express feelings that words could never capture. She had taken something ordinary and turned it into something extraordinary, simply by allowing herself to trust in the music and in her own ability. The realization filled her with a quiet joy, a sense of fulfillment that she had never known before. The melody continued to evolve, each note building upon the last. She experimented with dynamics, creating moments of tension and release, soft passages followed by bold, resonant chords. The audience responded instinctively, leaning in, holding their breath, letting the music guide their emotions. It was a shared experience, a moment of collective astonishment that none of them would forget. She felt the power of the piano beneath her hands, the resonance carrying through the room and into the hearts of those listening. The simple tune had become a vessel for emotion, a story without words that everyone could understand in their own way. She realized that the music was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone present, shared and alive in the space between performer and audience. Her confidence grew with every passing moment. The fear that had been present at the start was gone, replaced by a deep focus and clarity. She allowed herself to explore the full range of expression, moving from gentle, delicate passages to bold, dramatic moments. The audience was captivated, sensing the skill, the emotion, and the honesty that flowed from each note. Some people were visibly moved, their faces reflecting the impact of the music. Others were silent, lost in thought, experiencing a personal connection to the melody that they could not fully articulate. She could feel the room responding to her, each person engaged in their own way, yet united by the experience. It was a rare and powerful moment, one that could not be forced or replicated. As the music reached its peak, she allowed herself a final flourish, a delicate combination of notes that captured the essence of the performance. The sound lingered in the room, resonating in the hearts of the listeners. She held the last chord, feeling the vibrations travel through the piano and into the audience, then slowly let it fade. For a moment, there was complete silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, processing what had just occurred. The impact of the performance was undeniable. The simple tune had grown into something astonishing, and everyone present could feel the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The music had transcended expectation, revealing depth, emotion, and talent that had been hidden until now. She lifted her hands from the keys, letting the silence settle around her. Her chest was still racing, her mind awash with the thrill of what she had accomplished. The audience was frozen for a brief moment, caught between disbelief and admiration. Then, slowly, the room began to respond. A gentle murmur rose, followed by soft applause. It grew steadily, until the space was filled with genuine appreciation and astonishment. She sat quietly, humbled by the reaction, yet proud of what she had achieved. The music had spoken for her, conveying a depth of feeling and skill that words could not express. She realized that she had not only astonished the audience but had also discovered something profound within herself. The simple tune had unlocked a new level of confidence and expression, one that would stay with her forever. People began to approach her, quietly expressing their admiration and wonder. They asked questions, made comments, and shared how deeply the music had affected them. She listened, grateful and slightly overwhelmed, realizing that her performance had created a lasting impression. It was more than applause or recognition. It was a connection, an acknowledgement of her talent and her ability to move others. The room was alive with energy, yet there was a sense of calm that lingered after the performance. Everyone seemed changed in some small way, touched by the unexpected beauty that had emerged from a simple request. She stood, gathering her belongings, feeling a quiet pride and a newfound sense of possibility. The music had opened doors, not only for her but for those who had listened, allowing everyone to experience a moment of genuine astonishment and human connection. As she walked away from the piano, she knew that this moment would remain with her forever. The simple tune, once underestimated, had become a symbol of what could happen when talent, courage, and passion were allowed to shine. She had experienced the power of music to astonish, inspire, and connect, and she understood that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold in ways she had yet to imagine. The applause still lingered in the room as she gathered her belongings, her fingers brushing the edge of the piano one last time. She had played the simple tune, and then much more than anyone had expected. The energy of the room felt alive, almost tangible, like a current that had been built by every note she had played. People continued to whisper and murmur, replaying in their minds the unexpected journey the music had taken them on. She stepped back, feeling the weight of eyes on her, but not in a way that frightened her anymore. There was a quiet respect, a recognition that she had shared something real and profound. People approached cautiously, unsure if they should speak first, but eager to express their wonder. They wanted to know how someone could transform a simple tune into a performance that touched hearts so unexpectedly. Each comment was a reminder that what she had done mattered, that it had left an impression deeper than she could have imagined. As the room slowly returned to its usual rhythm, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her mind replayed every note, every pause, every variation she had added in the moment, and she realized how far she had come from the nervous hesitation that had greeted the simple request. The music had flowed through her in a way that felt natural, even inevitable, and it had reached the audience in ways that went beyond skill or technique. It was the honesty and depth behind each note that had resonated. A few people lingered near the piano, hesitant to leave, as if they wanted to hold onto the magic a little longer. She noticed their expressions, some still in awe, some quietly emotional, others simply lost in thought. She understood that the impact of what she had played was not fleeting. Music, when touched with heart and intention, had a way of embedding itself into memory, and she felt proud that her music had done that. She remembered the early days, the long hours of practice in solitude, and the many times she had doubted herself. No one had witnessed her dedication. Now, the room was filled with silent acknowledgement of all those unseen moments. She felt a sense of closure and validation, but also an opening, an awareness that this performance was just one step in a larger journey. The simple tune had become a gateway, showing her what was possible when fear was set aside and trust in her own ability was embraced. People began to approach her, some timidly, others with excitement. They wanted to ask questions, share how the music had affected them, and express their admiration. She listened to each comment with humility, grateful for the sincerity and warmth of their responses. Their reactions confirmed what she had felt in the moment. The music had created a shared experience, a connection that transcended words. She had not only played notes on a piano, she had touched lives. A few of the listeners asked her if she had performed professionally before, their curiosity genuine. She shook her head softly, explaining that her experience had been mostly private, hidden from public view. They were astonished. The fact that someone could hold such skill and emotion in reserve, and then reveal it so fully, added another layer to their admiration. The room seemed to hum with respect, a recognition that talent and passion often exist in quiet, unnoticed corners. As the crowd began to disperse, she lingered near the piano, reflecting on the moment. The simple tune, once underestimated, had become a catalyst for something extraordinary. It had transformed a brief, casual request into a profound connection. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only met expectations but had surpassed them in a way that was authentic and meaningful. The quiet joy in her chest was matched by a calm determination. She understood now that music was not just a hobby or a skill. It was a way to communicate, to share emotion, to touch hearts in ways that words often could not. The simple tune had been a starting point, and she now felt empowered to explore what else she could express, what other moments she could create through her playing. She realized that the experience had changed her, opening her mind to possibilities she had never dared to consider before. She walked through the room, noticing the small smiles and lingering glances from the audience members. They had witnessed something rare and beautiful, and their reactions were a reminder that art, in its purest form, had the power to astonish and inspire. She felt connected to them, even as they returned to their own lives. The impact of music, she understood, could extend far beyond the performance itself, leaving echoes that lingered long after the final note had faded. She stepped outside, taking in the cool air. The streets were familiar, yet the world felt different somehow. Her experience at the piano had shifted something inside her, a quiet confidence that came from embracing her talent fully. The simple tune had been a challenge, an invitation to step beyond comfort, and she had risen to it. She felt lighter, more capable, and ready to face whatever came next with courage and openness. As she walked away from the building, she reflected on the unexpected journey the music had taken her on. What had started as a simple, casual request had become a moment of profound connection, both with the audience and with herself. She realized that the beauty of music was not just in the notes played, but in the honesty, emotion, and courage behind them. Each person who had listened had shared in that truth, and she had shared in theirs. Her heart felt full, not from recognition or applause alone, but from the knowledge that she had dared to trust herself, to let the music flow, and to allow the audience to experience her true expression. She understood that this moment, though fleeting, was powerful and enduring. The simple tune had become a symbol of potential, of what could happen when talent and courage were combined with sincerity and passion. In the days that followed, she often thought back to that afternoon, the faces of the audience, the quiet moments of awe, the collective astonishment that had filled the room. She realized that the experience had left a mark not only on them but on her as well. It had reinforced her belief in herself, her abilities, and the value of her art. She understood that even a small, seemingly ordinary opportunity could lead to something extraordinary if approached with honesty and heart. The simple tune had started as an unassuming request, yet it had become a transformative experience. She carried that lesson forward, not as a story to boast about, but as a quiet reminder of what was possible when one trusted their own voice. The memory of the music, the connection, and the astonished faces stayed with her, guiding her toward future moments of courage, creativity, and shared humanity. She smiled softly to herself, feeling gratitude for the unexpected journey. The piano, the room, the audience, and the simple tune had all played their part in a story she would never forget. She had been asked to play something small, something simple, and in doing so, she had revealed something much larger. Not just to the world around her, but to herself as well. It was a story of courage, discovery, and the quiet power of music to astonish, inspire, and connect. A story she would carry with her always.